Oh, it's all kicking off between the blacks and the greens, 'cause Emma Aaron didn't have a son. Now the swords will flash and the togs will clash to the echo of a dragon song. Oh, it's all kicking off between the blacks. Hey, everybody, welcome to a little bitty FlashVOK. To quickly give our first impressions of the final episode of House of the Dragons, Season 1. My name is Bina 007. This is Vassals of Kingsgrave. We will spoil potentially anything in the written works of George R. R. Martin, but not House of the Dragons, Game of Thrones Beyond Season 5. I am joined by Jock.
Hello, Jock Monroe on the Discord.
And also by the person formerly known as Jeff14. Do you want to introduce yourself and tell us about the change in name?
Sure. So my name's Jeff. Sword of the Morning now. Ironically, this is also the account I use to play video games, so that's why I have the obnoxious Game of Thrones or Song of Ice and Fire title. And then in games, Sword of the Dawn, because Sword of the Morning's too long, but I'm fine with just calling Jeff, and I'm too lazy to actually change it.
That's brilliant.
I think I got into Song of Ice and Fire probably around Season 1, but ironically I didn't get it through the book, or through the series. I actually got it through the books, and then found VOK through Podcast of Ice and Fire, I think around episode 100, and I went through and re-listened to all the original 100 VOKs when I was marathoning through for work, so that's kind of my background, and then I've been gone for probably 4 or 5 years, and I'm back.
Blimey. And what got you back in? House of the Dragon, I'm assuming, getting back into the universe.
Yeah, I was so furious with the end of Game of Thrones that I just stopped, and then I couldn't deal with the fact that it's been 10 years since the next book's come out, so I went on a little relapse, and now I'm back.
Well, welcome back. Do you have a favorite character in the world of George R. R. Martin? Has it changed? Because you would have done this little intro last time you VOKed with us, but who's your current favorite? Maybe your favorite in this series or Game of Thrones? Maybe it is Arthur Dayne, I don't know.
Sure. So my favorite in A Song of Ice and Fire is probably Jon Snow, because I am a boring person. And then controversially, my favorite in A House of the Dragon is actually Alicent.
We picked an episode where she's not in it. Oh no.
I know. And then I'm going to add, because I know it's going to annoy Bina, my least favorite's Jaime.
Well, I can see that. I acknowledge that my love of Jaime is unusual, so that doesn't annoy me. I think that's kind of valid. I think I'm very much the outlier there. Anyway, welcome back to VOK. It's lovely to have you on. To explain to the listener, there will be your regularly scheduled Dragoncast and Wolfcast this week. This is just a little Blackfire Rebellion sort of mini VOK that will go out when the episode's released, for those of you who just absolutely can't wait for a bit of chat. Obviously, this episode was leaked, so some people, I feel, were kind of forced to watch it ahead of time for fear of being spoiled, because it was kind of everywhere. I think that's probably the position we're all in. But let's just get into it. So, Jock, what was your lemon cake rating, both for this episode and then for the series as a whole, now that we have it as a whole?
I'd say 4 out of 5 for this one. I really liked the episode. I just wish we got to see Winterfell, but love seeing Storm's End in sort of like all of its glory, which I don't think we saw a version in Game of Thrones. Don't remember.
I don't remember either.
But it looked absolutely amazing. Really shot out with like the Stormlands and with all the storms and having dragons flying in it. It was pretty amazing visually.
Yeah, we can get into it. I think the CGI of that final dragon confrontation was pretty epic. How come you doctored a point? Was there something in particular you didn't like? Or just in general, there's other episodes you preferred?
Needs more Clegg and Stark.
And for the season as a whole, do you feel happy with it so far?
Actually, it's probably one of my favourite shows I've seen this year, and it's near the end of the year, so
yeah, me
I think
too.
5 out of 5.
Yeah, absolutely. Cool. Okay, over to you, Jeff.
I'll probably give it a 4 out of 5. I agree that I loved seeing Dragonstone, Storm's End. Honestly, I don't think I appreciated Vhagar's size, and that was probably amazing to see just the size she has compared to the other dragons that I don't remember their name. And then overall, I'd probably give it to a 4. The series completely blew past my expectations. However, I kind of want to reserve 5s for like actually the best of Game of Thrones, as well as there were some decisions within the season that I wasn't entirely thrilled of, which are somewhat more controversial right now.
Yeah, is that all about the prophecy, or is that other stuff as well?
The prophecy, I really didn't like Granny's entrance last season. I think y'all have convinced me that it makes sense why she didn't kill the Greens, but I don't like that the showrunners put her in that position to begin with, and that's just largely my reservation. Though I did truly enjoy her this episode.
Yeah, they're definitely trying to play up the female rulers want to preserve the good of the small folk idea, aren't they? And only act in violence when pushed, which maybe is gender normative. I don't know. And then for me, I would say all the lemonade cakes, like infinity lemon cakes for this episode, minus one lemon cake for the prophecy, because but at least they're using it. If they introduced it, I guess is what you would say. But, I mean, I love the atmosphere. I love the cinematography. I love the set design. I love the acting. Oh my God, so many lemon cakes to the actors. I mean, there are so many episodes when I watched them this season where I was like, oh my God, that's so good, so subtle, so nuanced. And this was just yet another one where so much of the acting between Rhaenyra and Daemon was sort of glances unspoken. So I really love this episode. And actually looking at it as a season, I think some of the choices have paid off. Some I still find clumsy. There are still characters I think they've done dirty, but this is about as excited as I've been for this world, probably since season one of Game of Thrones. And in many ways, I think it's better. Like, I think this is like me watching Rogue One thinking, oh my God, is this actually my favorite Star Wars film? Like, it's that kind of unexpectedly good. Like, I didn't think it was going to be this good. So it's really sucked me in. Hence my enthusiasm to talk about it. Yeah, let's get into the episode. So as we start, so most of this really up until the final scene is set in the Court of the Blacks. In that early part of the episode, the one thing that did surprise me, I don't know if it just surprised me, was Rhaenyra looking so surprised. Like when she's given the news that Aegon's been crowned by the High Septon in front of lots of people, she looks really surprised. And is it surprise at Alicent's betrayal? Is it politically naive? I mean, how did you find that? And is that something that surprised you or felt real, credible? I don't know.
I guess if you take from her perspective, the last time she interacted with Alicent was at the feast where they agreed to patch up. So from that context, I could see general surprise, but at the same time, given Otto's position, it shouldn't really have caught her off guard, especially with the mindset of if you believe Alicent's in charge, it could catch her off surprise. But if you're assuming Otto at least have some say and some power in the kingdom or in King's Landing, this is like the only logical outcome. Excuse me.
Yeah, I agree. Jock, any thoughts on that?
Honestly, I thought like the shock was more due to her expecting the news to be about Corus Valerion and not the events in King's Landing.
Oh, maybe I'll have to rewatch. Maybe you're right. Okay, well, that would give it a different spin and an important spin, right? Because then he becomes a very important player. And then we go almost immediately into the birthing scene, which I guess we're meant to believe is brought on by this shock of her father's death and the crowning. And, absolutely devastating insofar as she births a stillborn child. It's, I think they're really leaning into the birthing bed as the battleground theme that we've had since the first episode with her mother. And at first I was like, oh my God, they're being very explicit about this birth scene. Then I thought, actually, when have I ever seen a stillbirth on screen before? And I don't think I really have. And I actually thought it was handled quite well in terms of being kind of very raw and vulnerable and showing like what it must feel like for the mother and how traumatic it is. But any thoughts from you guys? I think my only other thought was that maybe they should have put a trigger warning at the start of the episode, because that could be very triggering for someone. Jeff, you want to go first?
Sure. I guess the only thing I could say is like it was a clearly visceral reaction, and I'm sure that's what they're going for. But at this point, I could go without not seeing another birth in House of the Dragons, because I think we've had 4 or 5 this season, and I'm kind of done.
I think that's probably how the women feel themselves. Jock, any thoughts?
Well, it's just like I was. It's completely unrelated, but around about the same time as I was watching, I was reading about El Salvador's abortion laws and how they're basically criminalizing miscarriages and stillbirths. So,
really, gosh, oh,
yeah.
wow. But it is. I mean, it is heartbreaking, and I think I guess in a show that wants to show you that in general, the women are trying to be restrained rulers and only go to war when their children are threatened. I mean, maybe they're hammering it too hard as a point, but I think the start of this episode where she's lost one child and then the end where she's lost another, and this I think we're meant to think is a matter of days, as a means to driving a reasonable humanitarian woman to war. I think they're giving her all the sympathy there, maybe compared to Alicent. If you're an Alicent stan, how do you view their relative motivations as mothers, I guess, Jeff?
Oh, probably they're both looking out for their children, which I mean is the very generic answer, but I'd agree that this episode made Rhaenyra seem fairly sympathetic as well as what Alicent was last season, and I did appreciate that it seemed like she was taking Viserys' rule to heart and thinking about the kingdom as a whole rather than just the projection of power that Daemon was showing.
I thought it was really interesting in a season. So if you think of the themes of the season, one has definitely been the birthing bed, but I think another one has been about sexual consent. So both with Rhaenyra when she was really young with her uncle, and then with Alicent and Larys Strong last episode, and then in this one, sexual and political consent become really interesting. So at one point, after the awful birthing scene, you have Daemon asking the various sort of courtiers, "Are you going to bend the knee to my wife?" At the point at dragon point rather than even sword point. How far can you trust that oath? And then, like, thinking of political consent, like, we think she's in control, like far more in control of her life than Alicent, I always thought. But then he literally does a power grab in terms of grabbing her throat. How did you guys feel about that? That scene really shocked me, I have to say. I was not expecting that in that power dynamic.
Like, obviously, like, political consent is like a topic which is very broad, and I tend to stay with like the sort of like David Hume sort of interpretation, where it's just really the conquest of all against all rather than any real consent being involved. It's more a sort of power dynamic.
That's very dark, isn't it? Maybe that is what George R.R. Martin thinks. Gosh.
I think George R. R. Martin's more Machiavellian than Humean. Like, I think like Machiavelli is like quite Republican and democratic sort of optimism, sort of cynical optimism, rather than Hume's sort of like there is no God, like everything's all empiricist sort of inductive reasoning. I really see in Martin's work. I could be wrong.
I guess my question is, do you think this is how Daemon normally reacts, or is it more bloodlust for war that's warping his mind? Which both are inexcusable. I'm just curious if you think over the last 6 years, this is how Daemon's acted the entire time, or if it's more of the lust for power and just the lust for war and the fact that his family is being threatened, that he's raging and acting out in a manner that we all know he can.
It's really weird because I was just about to say, I think this is out of character, but then, we did see him basically quasi-murder his wife in the Vale of Arryn, right? But we've not really seen much of him in the intervening years to know if this is normal. Like, has he ever physically manhandled her before? We don't know. I tend to think it's because he's in extremis, because he sees a chance for power. But it doesn't really feel to me like with Alicent and Rhaenyra, especially Alicent, I get the feeling she's doing it to protect her children. I don't really get the feeling it's for his kids. I think it's just more, he's had to bend the knee to his wife in this episode, or a bit later on in this episode. And maybe it's just that if he can control her, he can be 100% in charge. Like he was second to Viserys. He's kind of second to this queen. But if he can get her into war and be a military commander, maybe he becomes the top guy. I don't know. What do you think, Jeff?
I thought we were previously established that he was never a threat to Viserys, or like if he was hand, he would cover Viserys' flaws. So this seems kind of a contradiction on like he's outwardly aggressing against Rhaenyra. I guess you could interpret it as it's entirely looking out for the house and acting out and trying to do the dirty work that Rhaenyra doesn't want to think about for now, and that kind of plays into the idea of disregarding her orders and then setting up everything in the sense of he knows what has to be done, and there is the overall sense of aggression, but he's just the dark dagger that's ready to do what's needed. And
the iron fist in the velvet glove.
Yes.
Yeah, literally shaking her into action. But then she does make that emotional power move, which is, oh, he didn't tell you about the prophecy, which I thought was quite interesting. Yeah, let's see how that dynamic plays out. The funny thing is I haven't read the books in so long. I don't know if this is true to Damon in the books. But I thought it was a very strong performance from both actors. But it really came out of the blue for me. How about you, Jock? How did you feel about it in terms of character? Did it feel out of character for you, for Damon?
Like to be honest, like with Damon throughout the whole thing, I've obviously struggled a bit because I'm a fan of Doctor Who, and we thought like combining like the Doctor and like Prince Philip with Damon, who is all very different characters who all like have an influence on my impression of Matt Smith. So I bring a lot of baggage to the portrayal that.
Although I don't think Prince Philip's quite similar insofar as he again is a military person, like Prince Philip was a naval officer, who probably does quite enjoy good war. He's subordinate to his wife because she's the one who's ruling and he has to exert his influence through her. And in The Crown, when you watch the Matt Smith parts of The Crown, there is a bit of that snark and a bit of that I'm giving orders and you're coming in and countermanding them, but I'm going to countermand them with a steely glance. I actually felt it was quite similar in some ways, although I don't want to imply that Prince Philip's a psychopathic as Damon, but yeah. Do you have that as an American viewer, Jeff? Do you think people in America have all the kind of the cultural role baggage that we bring to Matt Smith? Because I think Jock's spot on for an English audience.
I know I don't, and I would say the general audience definitely does not, but you could argue that there's a certain aspect of A Song of Ice and Fire fans and House of Dragon fans that also watch The Doctor, and then obviously they would still have that attachment. But I think generally speaking, Americans would not.
Yeah. So yeah. So maybe you guys are luckier because you have the blank canvas and just the acting, which is probably a good thing. But I did find it all very, very interesting seeing the two of them interact, and a lot of it was just with frosty glances. I thought the acting was really good up until that very shocking, like, physical moment. She does seem hell-bent on not acting too quickly, saving the small folk, doing what is best for Westeros. Like, she does that amazing speech, doesn't she, where she says, we Targaryens are meant to be close to gods, but actually we've got to act in the interest of men, which was very good. And there was a point where Lord Corlys sort of pledges the fleet to her, where she seems very humbled when she says, you honour me, Lord Corlys. I did find that I felt Rhaenys in this episode was more, not Rhaenys, Rhaenyra was more like Alicent insofar as she does seem more constrained. Like the permissible boundaries on which she's wanting to act are enforced ultimately by violence, her husband. But just in general, like, you know, when he's like, oh, come on, just look at this map. You know, you stop talking about men having this, and this. You know, we have this many dragons and we have a fleet that controls the entrance to King's Landing. There's kind of a momentum that's sweeping her forward towards conflict that she doesn't seem able to stop. Do you feel that if her son hadn't been swallowed by a dragon that, or sort of knocked off his dragon by a dragon, that she might have brokered a peace? Was peace ever possible? Was peace possible in this episode?
I think Rhaenyra and Alicent wanted peace, but I think the Lords of the Realm would not allow it.
But if they wanted peace, one of them needs to bend the knee to the other.
I think she would trust Rhaenyra. She wouldn't trust Daemon.
Exactly. And similarly, I think maybe Rhaenyra would trust Alicent, but not Otto. So then how can it be peace?
At this point, I don't really see how peace would be possible, but I'm kind of a cynic, so...
I feel that the show is trying to steer us in the direction of, if it were for the women, if it were for Rhaenys, Rhaenyra and Alicent, there would be peace in the realm that was in the interests of the realm. But because of the momentum of men, there is not. And the power of men, there is not. Maybe I'm being too reductive, but that was kind of the feeling I was getting as the episode went on.
Surprise you that during the coronation sequence, Rhaenys didn't kneel. Like multiple times, there were shots of everybody else kneeling, and Rhaenys was just standing in the background, smiling, and definitely loving the scene, but refusing to actually bend the knee. Maybe
she feels a bit like the Queen Mother, like sort of, you know, like a sort of equivalent to the Queen. Like, I could have been Queen. I don't need to, you know, I don't really need to bend the knee. But yeah, it was surprising to me, and it was surprising to me that it felt with the camera angles they were deliberately picking that out, weren't they? Maybe it shall prove fateful. Yeah. How do you feel about the two sons? Good acting, good casting?
What I'll say is, in the books, and granted this was like 6 years ago, I never really read into them this much, but they are definitely better than you would have expected. And I guess it was just being polluted by the Maesters calling them bastards the entire time. But if you really think about it, Jon Snow is also technically in the same level of bastard, half-blood. So I think they are better than basically every other child except for maybe Daemon's daughters.
Like Helena. Yeah. But what's interesting is that Jon Snow grew up always knowing he was a bastard, and if not knowing who his mother was, then at least never having been lied to about her status. What surprises me about these two boys is everyone says they're a bastard. Look at their hair; they must know they're bastards, and yet their mother has always fervently denied it. Wouldn't that make you a bit resentful towards her? And yet they seem to have a very good relationship with her. Like, they respect her, they tell her what they're feeling. When she swears them to an oath, they agree to it. I mean, there doesn't seem to be any kind of frostiness between sons and mum. For like, Mom, if you hadn't fucked this guy, we would have had a claim to the throne. What were you thinking?
That speak to like their reticence towards ruling, because they know deep down that they aren't true Targaryen, even though they're technically half Targaryens.
Maybe. And maybe if you think that Targaryens are sort of species different from normal men, maybe it speaks to a lack of ambition because they don't have that Targaryen lust for power. I don't know.
Yeah, and then a stupid question. Does Luke look too young? Or was he supposed to be that young, like the age difference, like just compared to Aemond and compared to Jace and all the other sons? He just looks noticeably like almost too younger than everyone else.
How old is he when he dies? He was born in 115 and he dies in 129. So he's 14. I think he looks about 14 to me. Well, how old did you think he looked?
12.
Yeah.
But like, if you're gonna age up everybody, it seems insane that you wouldn't age up Luke as well. So if you assume it's a 5-year age up, and this is completely pulling this out of my ass, but then he would be closer to 19, and he definitely doesn't look like he's 19.
Oh, no. He definitely looks more like the age he was in the book, for sure, which I felt he did look about right for that. But it's a weird time, isn't it? Because it just depends when puberty hits different boys and when they get their growth spurt. So I guess you could have gone for either option. I thought it was a decent actor, though. Like, he had a small role, but, pulled it off.
I think he was a brilliant actor. Just overall, the age discrepancy between Aemond, who looks like he's 30, and Luke, who looks like he's 12. It's just like, oh, okay, this is awkward.
Jock, any thoughts on the two boys as characters?
I'm not quite sure. Like, I don't feel like I've gotten quite a good impression of them, to be honest. Like, they're neither bad nor good. They're just
They are.
amazing acting, but nothing bad either. So
yeah, I thought they were quite spunky, especially the other one. I felt I quite admired them, and yeah, remarkably non-resentful given the troubled stories circulating about them. So yeah, but alas, poor Luke, we never really knew. Yeah, Aemond, on the other hand, they're leaning into the fact that he's a total psycho. But it's interesting, however, that when his as you said, massive dragon, right, that the relative scale was off the charts. I'm guessing this is accurate, but whoa, he just ate that other dragon like a little Ritz cracker. There is a look of absolute shock and panic on Aemon's face. How are you reading that? It was almost like what are you expecting? You chased him on a dragon that's 10 times the size of his dragon. Your dragon chomped on him. He's fallen to his death. Are we meant to read that face as oh shit, I didn't expect him to die, or oh shit, Mum's gonna find out, she's gonna be really pissed off, or oh shit, I just started a civil war, or maybe all of the three. I don't know. It wasn't like a Machiavellian, ha ha ha, I killed him, the little tyke.
I guess there's multiple parts of this question. A, do you believe this is a deviation from the book? And if so, then you could argue that he is surprised. Or if you think this is actually what happened in the books, and he's not as psychotic as he was. Or do you think he is, do you think he is as psychotic as he was in the books? Or is this a deviation where he was just trying to mess with Luke, and then the dragons got out of control and killed each other?
Yeah, is this just childish adolescent, hijinks that got out of hand, or was it intentional? I guess the look on his face would hint to the former. I'm trying to think back to what actually happened in the books, though.
I think in the books, and it's been a while, they basically said he chased him down, which is similar, and then he killed Luke in brutal fashion, which is a deviation, which to the show's credit, obviously only Aemond and Luke were there, so you really can't get a clean understanding of what happened. Just based upon personalities, you would think it would be more brutal or deliberate than it was in the show, and I don't know how I feel about it.
Yeah, any thoughts on this, Jock?
Honestly, I thought it was sort of like an intimidation tactic. Like that was his plan. Like he was just really intending to sort of like scare the guy, and then it got out of hand with the other dragon attack and Verax.
Yeah, I'm just trying to Google. So One Eye was born in 110, and Luke was born in.
He was born in 115, so he's 14.
So that means that What's It was 19.
Yes.
So it would be perfectly possible to not be fully in control of the situation, I think, and also not fully in control of your dragon. I mean, this is a war, as it's made very clear to us, right? Like a sort of a war veteran dragon of size. He does look genuinely shocked and genuinely like, oh shit, what have I done? Which I think is probably legitimate, right? Yeah. Okay. Well, I guess it'll be interesting to see what everyone else says about that. Anything else on the events in that part of the world? Like, this is us getting off that one location in this episode. How did you feel about the political, which of my daughters will you marry, piss off you young pup kind of attitude? Anything to say about that character or that sort of that laying out of that scene?
I guess the only thing you could say is, would it have been better for Luke to have lied and said, I'll choose your daughter A instead, and then worked out the circumstances later, assuming that this is actually a political play, rather than actually being truthful and honest and saying, all right, I'm already betrothed.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think
just deal with the fallout later.
I think Rob should have just started marrying everyone. Like he doesn't follow the steps, marry everyone he likes.
Couldn't he not have said, I'm not available, but my brother is, or has the brother also been betrothed?
They're both betrothed to both daughters.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, there you go. I don't think there's much he can do. Again, he's 14. I mean, like, he probably doesn't have a flipping clue. I was thinking, can dragons take two people on their back? Like, why not send someone else with him who can treat as well as him? It just felt like, what did you expect? You sent a kid into a negotiation. I mean, it's kind of nuts to me.
I guess who could they send, though, that would have the authority to marry a royal prince to an ally? Like, if they sent Rhaenyra, she could do it, but that would be completely... Like, if you send Rhaenyra, you don't have to send Luke, obviously.
Yeah, it's like, it trumps it, doesn't it? So, yeah, you're right. So the logic of it, to me, is kind of illogical, I guess. You don't send a kid in to do a man's job. Poor kid.
I forgot. You said we can spoil Fire and Blood, right? I can't remember.
Yeah. We can. In fact, we can spoil anything because Mary's not on, and we've all watched Game of Thrones. So honestly, we can spoil whatever we want.
So, do you think, from a macro perspective, this portrayal of the killing is going to make Blood and Cheese way worse for the blacks than it did in the books? Where, at least in the book, it seemed like on Aemon's part, this was an entirely barbaric act, and while Blood and Cheese is worse, you could see it's more proportional. Like, now it's going to seem like a clear overreaction.
Gosh, I don't know. Jock, do you have any theories on that?
Don't know. I guess it would depend on like how the story gets out and who says it and stuff. Like if it comes from like people loyal to the black, like they might exaggerate what Aemon did, or maybe even Aemon would exaggerate it himself, like in order to not like seem out of control, like he comes up with some sort of dumb scheme to like say like he did like all these barbaric things and on purpose. But I don't know, like it'll depend how they light it.
And I guess it's fairly obvious that Aemon killed Luke, since there's two dragons and then the dragons no more, but that seemed to be a fairly fast, like, we found this out and we send a raven to Rhaenyra. Or like in general, if you're Storm's End, do you want to be the one sending that message back that, oh, by the way, your son is dead?
Yeah. Not us, sorry. I promise you we didn't do it. It wasn't us. We escorted him to his dragon in one piece. Oh, but I guess the family knows the story about the one eye and that there's beef. So yeah, maybe they won't accuse the... And you could tell he was getting nervous as well, right? As host, he was like, "Oh shit! Like, nothing, don't do anything in my territory. That would not be good." Yeah, it's hard to tell. When do you think we're going to get to Blood and Cheese? Do you think that'll already be in season 2, or is that more like a season 3?
I think you have to put it in season 2, or too much time is going to pass between the two acts. And like I don't want to say a high point, but that's a noteworthy
episode. It's gonna be interesting to see if they do get it, like if they really do not have any ambiguity and just show that it's Aemon ordering the deaths, whether they try and keep some sort of princes in the tower like ambiguity around it, for sure. So while all this is going on, we've got a little Damon going to bond with a dragon, which I thought was very cool. Just generally, this whole episode looked cool and was cool. And then finally, we get the news getting back to Damon, mum and dad. Well, actually, not mum and dad, mum and new husband. And all you see is her being told with her back to us, and then she turns with this amazing acting look of sort of sadness, rage. She is now wound up for action for sure. Any comments on all of that? The sort of the way in which the episode winds to a close?
I know wish we also saw Alison Arato's reaction, but it makes sense from the standpoint of like the emotional point. But it would have been nice to see both sides have a final reaction outside of Eamon's "oh shit, what did I just do?"
Yeah, I guess they've kind of been hoisted by their self-imposed idea of having the green episode and then the black episode, I guess. Although I loved her owning that space at the end of the episode. You just think, God, this woman's gone through so much this season, gone through so much in this episode. And again, it is a little bit events, dear boy, events. Like events have overtaken her. Like whatever her idealistic, in a way you could argue both Alison and Rhaenyra are quite naive, and their idealistic hope for peace is just overturned by events. Yeah. Are you still agreeing at the end of this series? Well, not series, season.
Season? Sure. It's fun to play devil's advocate. I mean, honestly, at this time, because I don't remember what happens in the book outside of Blood and Cheese, I can't actually remember what side is stronger at this point. Obviously, the dragons would make it sound like the blacks are stronger, but
I've read too much fan fiction, like it's all like merged with like sort of
the reality.
Both I did enjoy was them keeping Glover Tully's name. I hope they keep all the Muppet names.
Yeah, I don't remember any of that stuff. It's in a way, I feel part of the reason I've enjoyed this series is partly because it's just very well done, but partly because I've liberated myself from actually remembering the books at all. But I feel that purely on what's shown to us in the show, I feel it has been far more sympathetic to Rhaenyra than Alicent. I think it's also been sympathetic to her too, especially in the last episode, but I feel that it's far more to Rhaenyra. But overall, I feel that, especially at the end of this episode, it feels very deterministic. It feels very much like these were inexorable forces. It feels to me a bit like World War One. Like it was just, at some point there was going to have to be a bloodletting, and it probably couldn't have been stopped just given where everyone was on either side, which I find quite sort of fatalistic and quite sad. It'll be interesting to see what everyone else thinks.
Well, obviously, those of Luxembourg would have disagreed quite a lot with that statement. She believed strongly that if SDP just stayed with the whole working class unity thing and didn't authorize the bonds and stuff and resisted the war, it could have been prevented. But
I bet you that this is the only bit of podcasting or fan reaction to House of the Dragon that mentions Rosa Luxemburg. And this is why it's always great having you on, Jock, because, yeah, we've definitely, I think that, well, I agree with you. I think she would disagree on that basis. But, and yeah, World War One and the causes thereof is another side podcast. But this felt very deterministic to me. Sorry, Jeff, what were you saying?
I was just going to say I don't hate any of the characters, which is somewhat surprising.
Yeah, and the triumph of the writing, maybe, and the acting.
I guess the other question is in the bridge scene, which is obviously a callback to when Rhaenyra was on the other side when Daemon stole the dragon. But do you think Daemon would have followed Rhaenyra's advice and not killed Otto there, or
no?
Yeah,
I think he's a hothead. I think everything we've seen this season shows that he's just a hothead who uses violence as a sort of knee-jerk reaction. Do you think it speaks to anything remotely profound that both of Rhaenyra's sons seem to be decent sorts, and both of Alicent's sons seem to be total shitheads, to the environment they were raised in, to their mothers, to anything at all, really? Is it a bit cruel on Alicent, the writing, both from George and then the adaptation, to make her son so absolutely hateful? I mean, you said you don't hate anyone. Surely, I mean, do you not dislike Aemond, One Eye?
Well,
Or do you just think he's a kid, so no?
I don't like Aemon, but I would argue that if you don't include Fire and Blood, Aemon's an asshole, but he's not a terrible person compared to his brother or even Daemon.
Yeah, I think compared to the brother, yes. Compared to Daemon, to be debated. But then again, I suppose Daemon, as I always keep forgetting, did kill his first wife. And he's just tried to strangle his second, or at least bully her. So yeah, actually, Damon is pretty bloody despicable. I do think there's an element in which the fact that it's Matt Smith and there's a residual fondness for Matt Smith makes me keep forgetting just how horrible Damon is. And I guess we're starting to see that more in this episode, right? The sort of insidious, nasty, controlling nature. There was the scene when he's like strangling, throttling his wife reminded me very much of Portrait of a Lady, Henry James adaptation starring John Malkovich and Nicole Kidman when Gilbert Osmond is doing that to the heroine, his wife. Like, she is the one with all the money and therefore the power, and he wants to assert his manly control over the marriage, and he physically and emotionally abuses her. I hope you see more of that. I hope in season 2, because I think it's a rich portrait to see such a strong woman, but so momentarily intimidated anyway. Really fascinating.
Well, I do agree that Rhaenyra is clearly the better mother of the two. I am kind of curious if the absence of Viserys, one, either because of his health, or two, of his general demeanor compared to Harwin Strong, also had some foundational issues with both of the boys on either side.
Yeah, like, was he just a good father? Yeah, I think that's valid. Anything else from either of you guys on this episode or on the season as a whole? Jock and I have had plenty of opportunity to discuss it, but Jeff, this is your first FlashVOK on the season. Anything else you wanted to say that you particularly loved, didn't like? You said you had some problems with it, with some of the choices. Do you want to give us a few sentences on that?
Sure. I am very much in the mindset of not being able to overlook like plot contrivances. So probably the best example would be the hyperspace kamikaze in The Last Jedi. But specifically about I didn't enjoy last episode when Rhaenys broke through the ceiling of the dragon pit or the floor for her escape. I loved the scene and I loved the look between the two, but I just don't think that in world she would have put herself in that position, and it's relatively hard for me to suspend my disbelief in that aspect, and that partially ruined last episode for me.
Oh no, that's sad, because it is an epic scene. For me, it was more, having done that, why didn't she just roast them all? But I think, yeah, if you give them their agenda of trying to show the women as more reasonable rulers, that works. But yeah, I can see that, and I think you're not alone, right? A lot of people had that issue with it around the writing of her character in general, and then that scene in particular.
Well, it was more of, I'm gonna break through the floor, kill thousands of small folk, and then I'm gonna turn around.
Yeah, leave the rulers untouched.
Yeah.
Fuck you,
I'm gonna
small
scream.
Yeah, no, I mean, yeah, I agree. Anything else from anyone else? Okay, dear listener, we hope you enjoyed this final episode as much as we did, and that you've enjoyed some of the commentary that we've been putting out as Vassals of Kingsgrave over this season. There will be, as I said, a full Dragon cast and Wolf cast. This is just a little FlashVOK teaser. If you want to be part of the discussion, because I'm sure there will be plenty of controversial things to discuss in this episode, as there always are, do join us on our Discord server. You can find the invitation to it by going to vokpodcast.wordpress.com, find us on Twitter, various other places, and you'll get the link. In the meantime, stay crispy. Bye, everyone.
Rhaenyra was a pretty princess, and she was the realm's delight. And her dad did declare that she was his heir, and the Iron Throne was her birthright. But Queen Emma died in childbirth. The king soon took another wife. Now Alicent wants her son on the throne, and it's left the realm in strife. Oh, it's all kicking off between the blacks and the greens, 'cause Emma Arryn didn't have a son. Now the swords will flash and the dogs will clash to the echo of a dragon song. Now Rhaenyra married Leonor, but he preferred the brown and not the pink. She had 3 strong sons, not a silver hair on one, so Harlan Strong's the sire everybody thinks. Now Alicent gave the king more children, and Aegon was the eldest son. Soon the princess and the queen became the blacks against the greens, and the dance of the dragon soon begun. Oh, it's all kicking off between the blacks and the greens, 'cause Emma Arryn didn't have a son. Now the swords will flash and the dogs will clash to the echo of a dragon's song. Now the king, he has a brother, the dragon rider Prince Daemon. The first wife he stoned and the second one was burned, but he wasn't left alone very long. For he is a true Targaryen, they like to keep it in the family. When not riding Syraxes, then he's riding on his niece, a rogue prince forever he shall be. Oh, it's all kicking off between the Bracks and the Greens, 'cause Emma Aaron didn't have a son. Now the swords will flash and the togs will clash to the echo of a dragon song. Oh, it's all kicking off between the Blacks and the Greens, 'cause Emma Aaron didn't have a son. Now the swords will flash and the togs will clash to the echo of a dragon song.